All right, let's go ahead and get the show on the road. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our weekly 30-minute webinar. My name is Victor Verba, and I'm a systems engineer over here at Variphy. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and today I am joined with Dan Schmidt, another engineer, aka Danimal. For today's webinar, we're going to go ahead and go over how to use Variphy's public search sets to build some pretty in-depth security profiles. We're going to go ahead and start off with a quick overview of Variphy, what our company does. We'll jump into a live demo where Dan's going to guide us through how to use those public search sets to build some security profiles. After the demo, we're going to pause for some Q&A, get all your questions answered. If you do have questions, please make sure you put them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right-hand side. And then after Q&A, we're going to go ahead and reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card. So definitely make sure you hang out and see if you are the winner. So quick overview of Variphy. Variphy is the preferred Cisco collaboration leader for CDR reporting, call analytics, customizable dashboards and widgets, UCCX reporting, remote phone control, as well as change management. But for the purpose of today's session, we're going to be learning how to build some pretty finite security profiles using Variphy's public search set. So if you have any other questions on any of the other features, we can most definitely take those offline. You can send me an email or reach out to your account manager. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that Variphy does offer a fully managed consultative service to all of our customers. If you go ahead and take advantage of our NECS or Ninja Enhanced Consulting Services, you're basically going to be working with a one-on-one systems engineer. We're going to do all the heavy lifting for you. We're going to help you build your reports. We're going to build those reports for you. So that's a service that's provided with a unique one-on-one systems engineer that's dedicated strictly to your account. If you have any questions on our NECS services, again, feel free to reach out to myself or your account manager. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the ball over to you, Dan, and let's go ahead and get the show on the road.
Hey, thanks, Vic. And thank you, everyone, for joining this week's webinar. Let me take control.
You are good to go, my man.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is.
All right. So this week, as Vic mentioned, we're going to be covering effective ways of using public search sets within the Variphy application. And this is kind of a tangent of a webinar we did a few weeks ago, which really focused on creating users and groups. And then we kind of talked a little bit about Active Directory integration and how you could really hone in on really specific security rights within the application. So this webinar takes a deeper approach and focuses more on the content restrictions rather than the access restrictions. And so what I'll do is today show you a few examples using the public search sets feature to restrict data visibility and what effects they may have in both your dashboards and your reports. Okay, so I always like to use real world use case scenarios to drive the feature here. So that's what I'm going to do here today. So logging into Variphy as a system administrator, right? We always talked about in our users and groups, you could go build those out. And, with the Active Directory integration, that's a really nice way of encompassing multiple users and those users inheriting a group's security. So we still have that in our lab today here. And we are looking at a specific user in a specific use calls. This user's name is called Debbie. So I'm going to go to Debbie's account here, Dborn, and Debbie has extension 1166. And Debbie belongs to the accounts payable department. She's a mid-level accounts payable employee. And in Variphy, she has her own user here. And she is set up to only be able to see her own data. Okay, so she's obviously not a system administrator. We'll give her the permission to change her own password. Here's where it kind of gets a little bit finite, where you could say what permissions, and this is what we talked about in the last webinar. Do they have access to dashboards? If so, what can they do? Do they have access to run their own call reports, right? So we're enabling the call analytics feature. we're restricting the data visibility here. So this is where we kind of branch off of the last webinar that we did on this topic. Using the restricted visibility settings and the search set restrictions, we can really impose a set of rules on Debbie's user account. So when she logs in, she's only able to see specific sets of data. Okay, so she could try to run, all calls for the entire organization. This is really restricting that back and is not going to allow it. So as you can see here, Debbie is set to run call data and reports, viewing only her own data. Okay, so I've got another screen here that I'm going to bring up. I've logged in as Debbie. Okay, and as you can see here, we're on Debbie's dashboard. Okay, so logging in immediately, I could very well see that even though this widget is looking for all calls, right? I've used a wildcard, calling party number contains anything. Even though we're searching for all calls, you could see that the return or the output is really restricted to only Debbie's calls, 1166. So you can see 1166 up here in these calls. Now, so that's great, but let's go back to the use case. Let's go back to the fact that Debbie just got a promotion and she is now the head of the accounting department. Okay, so with that, right, in a normal everyday environment, HR would need to be involved. A request to the IT department would be named to update her Active Directory profile, change her department information, maybe change her group policy information. That's all great, but sometimes that could take some time, right? So if we want to impose these new, I guess I'll call them allowances to Debbie, this could be done in Verify before we have to wait for an AD profile to get updated if you guys are synced with Active Directory. If not, we could very easily turn view as own user off, and we have a reference to search set restrictions. And these are just a basic list of our public search sets. So we've got a long list of other search sets that have previously been made here, but I'm going to jump over into a public search set now. Okay, so those are defined with our call analytics tool, and under the configure tab, you'll see public search sets. Now I've created one called the accounting department, but if I go into this public search set, you could see that it's basically a search criteria or a group of criteria. In this case, it's very easy. Originating or terminating department equals the accounting department. So again, this is another sign of the great benefit of us having the connection into Call Manager. You don't necessarily need to throw out exact numbers or exact device names. We're going to query Call Manager for that information, all based off of the Call Manager that exists, or sorry, the department that exists in end user profiles. And that, in this case, department is called accounting. So we're going to query Call Manager first, find all the profiles and all the extensions and devices associated to this department, and allow this now to Debbie's user account. So when we go back to Debbie's user account, we're going to make that change. Okay, so scrolling down here, we're going to disable where we picked up off, disable view as own user, but set the restriction of only the accounting department, meaning Debbie could log in now and see all calls belonging to the entire accounting department. So I'm going to save this. Okay. Okay. Now I'm going to bring back Debbie's user interface real quick again. I'm going to log off and log back in to see the changes to Debbie's access. Deborn. Okay, so we're going to go in and build out a report. Okay, so let's say Debbie logs in and wants to create a new report and show basically the entire accounting department's calls instead of just her own calls. So I've got a pre-made report here. I'm going to edit it just for so we're all on the same page here, right? Again, this report is looking for calling party number contains anything, so all calls. This is not really too important. Debbie may want to include additional summary information. She's now the head of a department going forward here, so we're going to save this. Okay. Now, when I run this report, I'm going to say, look at previous week and current week. Oops, it's day. All right, let's run that. And what we have, oops, what we have now $99 calls, whereas before we only saw 5 or 6. Okay, so calling partner number contains X. Scrolling down, we have the 99 calls, all belonging to every call here in this list should belong to the accounting department. So as you can see, right, running this in either a dashboard version or a report version, you can run the same report instead of creating multiple reports and including different filters for each individual report. You could create essentially one report with a very vague search criteria option. But you can see the importance of these public search sets, right? It's restricting the visibility into the data on that report without having to change anything within that report. Okay, so on the CDR front, right, very, very important to, one, get your Active Directory users built, but if that's taking a while and those restrictions really aren't kind of coming in immediately, this is a way around that. You could build this out manually and verify without having to rely on the actual profile information. So building out, limited user-based access and data visibility restrictions to only their data. And then you could see very, very easily how easy it is to really open that up or maybe scale back down. Maybe they were an admin of sorts, and then you want to scale back their access. You could do that with public search sets very easily. Okay, the first piece is creating that public search set in the admin profile, because non-admins will not be able to create public search sets, of course. Let me get rid of this here. So going back to my admin screen here, call analytics reporting, configure, and then the groupings, however you want to set them up. And we've got many customers that have lots of public search sets just because they could do multiple things with these. You could perform grouping options. Okay, you could perform security or restriction access to that data via these public search sets. And then appending that at a user basis tends to be pretty helpful. Okay, so that's the first example that we have is on a CDR front. The next example that we have is more going to be focused around a contact center. In the case where public search sets are created, these can be created both on a CUCM cluster type as well as a CCX cluster type. And I've got another user here that I'm going to pick on where agent Dan is logging in on their instance of Variphy. And to the same effect, they are only being able to see a specific group of information. Okay, so let me go ahead and set that up for us here real quick and log into the other accounts. All right, let me bring this over here. All right, so I'm looking at a user Dan. So going back to my users list here on my admin view, we're going to take a peek of what Dan can access and what visibility restrictions he has. Okay, so in this case, Dan is actually part of an Active Directory group, meaning Dan's logging in with his network credentials into the application and gaining access to the features and the data sets that's allowed to him. So notice here, assign groups, this is telling us that he's part of the IT help admin. So we actually need to go back one step because this user is inheriting security permissions based off of the group. So we have to go to user groups and then go into the associated group. And here we can see backwards compatibility at the group level. We're seeing user Dan is associated to that. And for now, this user is a system administrator, meaning this user could see everything and do everything within the Variphy application. We're going to scale this back, right? The other scenario was opening up access. In this scenario, we're removing access, okay? So the opposite. So very easily, we're going to uncheck system administrator here because we don't want Dan to be a system administrator. We want Dan to be restricted to a specific set of data on the contact center cluster. So first things first is, yes, we're going to allow them to change their own time zone. We want to give them access to the dashboarding to see potential CDR data and or CCX data, and that's going to be allowed down below here. Okay. We've already got the cluster assigned to them, Variphy UCCX. Okay, so this user could run data, see dashboard, wallboard information off of this cluster. Okay. As it is a contact center express cluster, there's two ways of restricting data. Different from the call manager type, because there's more ways to match up security permissions to the data. In a contact center express cluster type, we're really limiting it to two ways. Whether or not this user is a team supervisor. And so the rule there is the user ID that we're using within Verify has to be the same as the user ID that's logging in and to Finesse and is their team supervisor. We can auto determine that as long as the user IDs match up. If they don't, the really quick and easy way of doing this is, again, using those public search set restrictions. On the CCX cluster, I've got a public search set that's calling out the IT help team. That is, if we could look it up here, we'll go back to my CCX cluster. We'll go to Verify CCX, go to reports, and we'll go take a look at our configure tab and our public search sets. There they are. We've only got two of them on this cluster, but if I take a look at this, I can very easily see that, hey, this is just calling out team equals IT help. In my example, I could very well easily change this and look on a broader scale. Maybe I want to say that this should not be a team per se, but specific to a CSQ, right? CSQs are really good if you're just wanting to see all calls entering in the queue. Majority of these are going to be inbound unless you do some outbound call campaigns. But in my example, I'm going to actually change this to CSQ. Okay, so let me change this real quick. And I'm actually going to change it to the CSR. And IT help desk. All right. Okay. If I wanted to, I could certainly remove IT help here. I'm going to remove that and save it. Okay. So now when someone goes through a caller goes through queue and either hits the cars queue or the IT help desk queue, this public search set that we have set here is going to be able to pool and show that data. The second part of this is mapping this public search set to the user now instead of being a system administrator. And remember that this user was part of an Active Directory group, so we want to go to the group, and that's where the security is done. So we're going to disable system admin. We're going to do all the ones we saw before. And now notice that we still have the same search set restriction. It's called IT help team. That's fine. Right, the two that we had listed before, but now the changes are going to be reflected here in the UI. So the next piece of this is when they log in and their data is restricted, to what extent is it restricted? Are we saying that these users could only access specific reports by name? And in this case, I have called out one specific report that this user can see upon logging in. It's called the agent detail report. Okay, so I'm going to save this here, and I'm going to log in on my other screen with the new user. Bring that over, and I'm going to log in. There's Dan. Okay, notice how when logging in, it went straight to the reports tool. Now this could be customized per user on a user basis, not an admin basis, and that's going to be controlled within our user account settings, and that's the little circle here. And this is saying, well, default to the one CCX call analytics cluster, right? Verify UCCX. But what feature am I going home to upon login? And you can see in this case, based off of the restricted feature access on the group that Dan is part of, they really only have access to dashboard or the CCX reporting tool. Okay, so this is homed to the CCX reporting tool, and notice the only one report that Dan is allowed access to. Now I've got two reports that I ran previously up here just to show you and mimic the before and after of what Dan would see before the access was given, and then again after the access was given. So again, one report, but totally different content. Okay. So the first report here is agent detail report. And as you can see, this was a system administrator ran report because he had the system admin credentials on it. So with no filters on the report, I could see that this is literally reporting on every single agent within my contact center cluster. Okay. We don't necessarily want that now for Dan because Dan's users restrictions have been imposed. And so it's calling out that specific group of individuals on those two queues. We had the cars queue and then the IT help desk queue. Okay. So when Dan logs in and runs this report again, here is the second version of the report. It's a really scaled back version of this report. Okay. Again, you can see the name of the report has not changed. The filters have not changed. It's simply generated by Dan. And since it's the after effect of the security impositions on the user account, we can now see that this report only really contains 5 or 6 agents on this report because it's specific to what's defined in that public search set. Okay, so scrolling down, I've got the 5 agents summary information, and then we have the details for all the calls for those 5 agents. And I'm trying to see here. Yep, we could see here exactly the CSQ name that these calls routed through. Okay, they're all IT help desk calls because that's what's imposed on that public search set. So again, hopefully another example of really good ways of, instead of creating so many different reports with so many different filters, you create one, I'll call it a open constrained report, but really allow the public search set criteria to define what's included on those reports. And then they could obviously be delivered on different scheduled bases. So at, let's say, 2 a.m., Rudy here gets a version of the report, and that's only going to contain Rudy's information. Vastly at 3 a.m., the next agent in line would be Max. Max would get the same report, reading off of the same template, just with different content, based all off of the security profile information on those public search sets. Okay. I do also want to state that this actually alters the dashboard information or dashboard visibility as well. And I'm glad that we're seeing this now too, because this is actually a good way to show that users that were previously defined with admin access, they were able to see everything, no restrictions. I used to have a widget on Dan's dashboard that allowed that information. And very easily you could see that, hey, Dan no longer has the privileges on dashboard widgets to see on this cluster the content that they're requesting because it's been restricted at a user level now, right? So that is not going to be allowed. So hopefully with those two things, the changes on the dashboard and the changes within reports, all based off of those public search sets, hopefully you guys see some benefit with that and can go forward using those public search sets instead of so many individual reports based off of feature access. So with that, thank you. I'm going to hand it over back to Vic. With the last couple minutes, we'll take some questions.
All right. Awesome job, Dan. Thank you very much. Dan, I'm going to go ahead and just leave you the presenter for a second here. Let's answer a couple questions in case we need to show anything on the screen here.
Sure.
So we did have a few questions here. And if you have any other questions, again, please use the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand side. But we did have one from Stacy. She said, I noticed that you have an option can access all shared reports. I don't have that. What is that? Oh, you know what? Okay. I think she's talking about in security profiles. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk. Go ahead and talk a little bit about that, Dan. Okay.
Yeah. Let me go back to my test user here, Debbie. And so, Stacy, yeah, good question. This is newer to the application. I believe it was 12.1.5 or 12.1.6 in that time frame where we allowed or included this new option, can access all shared reports. Going back to the test user, right, where we see where you have a listing of every shared report. Now, when you go build out the report, that first checkbox in the report builder is can be shared, right? That allows other admins to see that report and can potentially share to other users. So instead of going one as an admin, if I'm setting up this user, instead of allowing one report at a time and then giving each of their own individual permissions, like maybe the abandoned calls report should only be read, or maybe the analog devices report, right? I could change the permissions for each instead of going one by one. We've included the can access all shared reports to very easily just check that, and it eliminates the individual report addition. So it's saying take all shared reports, so every possible report that can be shared, give access to this new individual at what permission setting. So can they only read these shared reports? Can they only read and edit these shared reports, or full access? Which, if they're shared reports, we really wouldn't advise full access, because that does allow the potential of a report being deleted. And if a shared report is deleted, it's going to affect more than just this one user. So read or edit. So yeah, Stacy, hopefully that answers your question. It's just an easier way of sharing out all your reports at once with a specific permission, instead of doing report by report by report. So it's a huge time saver.
Awesome. So yeah, it sounds like, Stacy, if you need a hand getting upgraded or anything, so that way you can get that option, feel free to reach out or check our KB. We've got some upgrade information on there as well. Couple more, Dan. Question from Mike. If I restrict someone to access a certain extension or department, does that affect the cradle to grave? Okay, good question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So on the call manager front, when you enable Cradle to Grave, right, what it's doing is it's doing a query, and per your public search sets or data restrictions, obviously that's going to be imposed. We will also impose the security restrictions or data restrictions on top of that, and it will include the Cradle to Grave components as well. So once you impose that security restriction or the data security restriction, you will not be able to see that data anywhere in that report.
Okay. Excellent. Just a few others here. Rob asked, if I give someone departmental access in the security and a public search set, do those compound? So their security will have both rules?
That's a great question. Yeah, so when we, at the beginning of the call, we discussed view his own user, view his manager, one of them being view his own department. Again, these three are relying on call manager. So as long as the user IDs match up in call manager, we're able to determine what department this user has. And then we're going to find all other end user profiles that have the same department, basically create a virtual grouping. If you have both of these set, it is compounding the data or the restricted data allowed, because you're basically saying do or allow all data for this department, or it's an or statement, the accounting department. So if in call manager, this user born, so Debbie, if let's say Debbie was originally part of the customer success department, right? But then they moved to the accounting department. If we have both of these on, and in the call manager, it's still the old information, the customer success department, you're basically you're allowing information to both those departments, because these are basically an or statement in between each of these. Yep. So that's an excellent question.
All right. And we did get a couple more, Dan. We've got about a minute or so, so I'll try to get to as many as we can here. We had a question from Pat come in. Is there a way to organize search sets besides alphabetically, like a folder to help? So I think Pat's talking about the public search sets, how it's just in an alphabetical order, like a bucket or anything like that.
That's a great question. Unfortunately, in today's app, it is just alphabetically. I could certainly bring that suggestion to the product team. I like that, being able to group or bucketize public search sets. And again, public search sets are really only derived as at an admin level. So normal users won't be able to create their own, public search sets. This is an admin level setting, but being able to group these and maybe tier them would be nice. So yeah, I'll take that to the product team for sure.
Great. All right. And Dan, I know we are out of time. There are a couple other questions, but I did log those. So anybody with additional questions, we'll go ahead and reach out and make sure that we get those answered for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen out here. Let's see.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And the winner of today's event is Laura Bennett. Laura, congratulations. We'll go ahead and reach out and make sure that you get that $50 Amazon gift card. Again, thank you guys, everybody, for attending. Please make sure that you register for our next upcoming webinar, December 16th. And that's going to be taking a look at advanced search sets and how to use multiple search sets within a single report to really define some very specific calling scenarios, but get that all bundled into one report. So again, I want to appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, all.
Be safe. Bye-bye.